he was forgotten, left behind at a shelter, sick, alone, and running out of time. But on the night they gave up on him, he didn't give up. Somehow, against storms, against pain, against every odd, this dying dog escaped and set out on one final journey to find the boy who had once promised him forever. And when they finally locked eyes again, the moment shattered every heart that saw it. Max had once been the pride of Hunter's Crossing, a dusty little town where everybody knew your dog's name as well as your own. He was a golden retriever, strong and bright-eyed, who belonged to Luke Bennett, a boy who loved him with the fierce devotion only kids seem to know. For years, they were inseparable. Wherever Luke went, Max was there too, riding in the back of the pickup, chasing sticks down by the creek, sleeping, curled up at the foot of Luke's narrow bed. It wasn't just boy and dog, it was a bond, stitched tight by every scraped knee, every lazy summer, every whispered promise of forever. But life didn't honor promises the way kids did. When Luke left for college, 2 states away, the Bennett's world crumbled faster than anyone expected. A sudden divorce, lost jobs, bills stacking up like fallen dominoes, and in the mess of selling off their land and finding somewhere cheaper to live, Max became a problem nobody knew how to solve. Luke's father, bitter and angry, took Max to the county shelter, saying it was just until we get settled. Nobody ever picked him up again. Max didn't understand. One day he was chasing moths in the yard. The next, he was locked behind cold iron bars, staring through chain link at strangers who passed him by without a second glance. He waited. At first, every voice, every footstep made his ears perk up, his tail thump weakly against the concrete. But Luke never came. Days bled into weeks. Max's golden coat lost its luster. He grew thinner, quieter, a little more invisible each day. Then came the bad news. Late-stage cancer, the vet said gently. Not much time left, not much we can do. The shelter was overcrowded. Puppies came and went in a blur, bright and noisy and full of hope. Max, silent and slow, was just one more old dog with sad eyes and no one left to fight for him. The decision was made, quietly. Mercifully, they told themselves. Tomorrow, they said, tomorrow, we'll let him go. But that night, as a summer storm rolled in from the west and rattled the shelter windows with angry fists of wind, Max did something no one expected. He refused to wait for tomorrow. He was going home. The storm cracked open the night sky like a fist through glass. Rain slashed sideways against the shelter's sagging roof, the gutters overflowing in dirty torrents. Somewhere down the line of kennels, a latch, old and rusted from too many seasons of neglect, snapped loose with a metallic clatter. Max heard it. He lifted his head from the cold concrete floor, ears twitching weakly. His joints ached, every breath a battle, but something deep and primal stirred inside him, something bigger than pain, bigger than the heavy, drugged exhaustion that had settled over him for weeks. It was instinct, it was memory, it was the echo of a boy's voice calling his name from across a sun-drenched field. Staggering to his feet, Max pressed his nose to the gap where the door hung crookedly. Outside, the night howled and shivered, but it smelled like freedom, like earth and water and sky, like the world he used to know. He slipped through. The rain soaked him instantly, drenching his patchy coat, but Max barely noticed. He limped across the muddy yard, through the broken gate, and out into the wild, wet dark. His paws slipped on the slick ground. Every step felt like dragging an anchor. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Somewhere, out there, was home. Somewhere, Luke was waiting, even if Luke didn't know it yet. Max followed the only compass he had left, the fading imprint of a life he refused to forget. He crossed open fields where the grass whipped his legs bloody, crawled through drainage ditches slick with rain, skirted the edges of strange roads where headlights hissed past like angry ghosts. No one saw him. No one stopped. At times, the pain was so sharp he collapsed, belly flat against the earth, the storm pounding him mercilessly. But after a few minutes he would lift his head again, sniff the air like a sailor lost at sea, and stumble forward. Shelter workers would later shake their heads, call it a tragedy. An old, sick dog lost in the worst storm of the summer, doomed to die alone in a ditch somewhere. But Max wasn't wandering aimlessly. He was going back to the only place that had ever mattered, back to the boy who had once promised him forever, back to the heart he still believed he belonged to. Luke Bennett hadn't planned on coming back to Hunter's Crossing. Not really. The town felt too small now, too full of ghosts, too weighed down by the heavy silence of all the things that had gone wrong. But when his mother called, voice tight, trying not to cry, to tell him she needed help packing up the last of the old house before the bank took it, Luke couldn't say no. He owed her that much. He owed a lot more. He spent the first few days working through the ruins of his childhood, sorting through boxes of faded photographs, rusted tools, broken dreams. Every corner of the house hurt. Every creak of the floorboards whispered memories he wasn't ready to hear. Mostly, he thought about Max, the golden retriever who had slept at the foot of his bed every night until the day Luke left for college, believing stupidly that everything would stay the same. Believing that promises made at 13 still mattered when life got complicated. Believing that love was enough. He didn't know exactly what had happened to Max after he left. The story changed depending on who he asked. Shelter, adoption, something about new families. Nobody gave him a straight answer. Nobody wanted to. And so Luke carried the guilt quietly, tucked under his ribs like a shard of broken glass. On the third night home, restless and heartsick, Luke sat out on the front porch with a beer growing warm between his hands. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled like rain and regret. The old dirt road stretched empty and endless into the darkness, until it wasn't empty anymore. A shape emerged from the shadows, staggering toward him. At first, Luke thought it was a coyote, maybe a stray. Skinny, soaked, limping badly. His hand tensed around the bottleneck. But then he saw it, the familiar curve of a muzzle, the crooked tilt of a tired, beloved head, the desperate, stumbling hope in every painful step. Luke stood up so fast the chair clattered over behind him. "Max," he said, the word tearing from his throat like it had been waiting there for years. The dog tried to lift his head higher. His tail gave one weak, wobbling thump against the muddy ground. And then his legs buckled, and he collapsed in the middle of the road, too exhausted to take another step. Luke didn't think. He ran, barefoot through the mud, heart hammering against his ribs like a freight train. He slid to his knees beside the crumpled figure, reaching out with shaking hands. "Max," he choked, voice cracking wide open. "Buddy, it's me. I'm here." Max let out a soft, broken whimper. Not fear, not pain. Recognition. Relief. His nose nudged weakly against Luke's palm, as if trying to make sure this wasn't just another cruel dream. It wasn't. It was real. Luke scooped him into his arms, holding him close against his chest, the way you hold something you never, ever want to lose again. The rain-soaked fur, the trembling ribs, the terrible fragility of him, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that Max had found his way home. After all the miles, after all the years, he had kept his promise. And now, Luke would keep his. Luke carried Max inside, cradling him like something sacred. The house, stripped nearly bare for the move, felt strangely full again, full of breath, full of heart. He found every blanket he could, layering them in the corner of the living room. He rubbed Max dry with old towels, whispering nonsense words, hands trembling as he worked. Max lay still, eyes half-lidded, but his tail gave tiny, lazy thumps every few minutes, just to let Luke know he was still there, still listening. At first light, Luke bundled Max into his battered truck and drove straight to the only vet in town who hadn't left or gone broke. Dr. Mayfield took one look and shook her head sadly, but she understood without needing words. "This old boy's got more heart than most people I know," she said, smiling through tears. "We'll keep him comfortable. We'll buy him some time." And that's what they did. For 30 days, Luke and Max lived the kind of life that boys and dogs dream about. They didn't waste a second. They napped together under the sycamore tree. They drove the back roads with the windows down, Max's face in the wind, eyes half closed in pure joy. Luke threw tennis balls just far enough for Max to lope after them, triumphant every time he brought one back. They sat by the creek where they used to swim, Luke's arm slung loosely over Max's shoulders, the sunset painting them both in gold. Max got weaker day by day, but he never lost the light in his eyes, not this time. And when the last morning came, when the sun rose slow and pink over the hills, and Max's breaths grew shallow and thin, Luke was there. He lay beside him on the quilt, arms wrapped around his best friend, whispering, "It's okay. You're home. I've got you. I'm not letting go." Max's last breath was a soft sigh against Luke's chest, like he was finally letting himself rest. No cages, no strangers, no fear. Just love. Just home. Luke stayed there long after Max was gone, the quilt damp with tears, the air thick with the kind of grief that breaks you wide open and still, somehow, stitches something stronger inside. Some goodbyes are sharper than knives, but some, when they are chosen, when they are shared, are the purest kind of grace. Luke would carry Max's memory for the rest of his life, not as a wound, but as a quiet, steady pulse under his ribs, a reminder that loyalty, once given, never really ends. Not in this life. Not ever.